Started. I know we're on a tight schedule, so I thought we'd get it going. Before I begin, Senator Parks is not going to be available, and so to my right is her vice chair, Senator Fillingame. So I appreciate him being here. I appreciate everybody being here. This is a big topic, and we're talking about COVID and the CARES Act and broadband and how we can use it and how we can use it for distance learning is what I understand. And so I want to jump right into it, and I'll let Senator Fillingame say a few words. But what I'd like to hear from our speakers this afternoon is short term, how do we get all of our students connected with devices? And in the short term, as well as in the long term, what our long range plan is and how much it's going to cost our schools or our school districts or our State Department. Lieutenant Governor Hosemann and I did probably 30, 40, 50 Zooms in the last month or two, and up close to 50% of the kids that we talked with did not have hardware, let alone connectivity to the internet. And so it's one of the biggest issues we got to deal with at this point. We spoke with, I think, 19 superintendents from the Delta, almost to a one. They said they had no internet access to their students as well as their teachers at their own homes. So we want to focus on not only the unserved areas but the underserved areas and how we can make that happen. And so I'm going to turn it over to Senator Fillingame if he's got any remarks, and then after that we'll look forward to hearing from Dr. Wright.
Thank you, Chairman DeBar, and thank you all for being here. I would echo some of the same comments and tell you that Chairman Parks is following along as she is traveling, but she'll be back later this afternoon or in the morning. But we do appreciate you all being here. And in addition to what Chairman DeBar just said, I think it would be helpful for us to know also, we know there's different pots of money from the federal government that have come down, not just this $1.25 billion. So in your presentation, your remarks, if you could tell us maybe how much your particular entity has already received from the federal government or expects to receive, separate and apart from the $1.25 billion that we're talking about here, so we could have a clearer picture of what you actually are working with on your balance sheets. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fillingame. Dr. Wright, look forward to hearing from you. If you'll come up to the well here.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. To your question about the money, I think it is important to know that the CARES Act gave 3 buckets of money to states. They gave a bucket to the governor, and our governor got about $34.6 million. K-12 gets $169.9 million, and then higher ed, I don't have their dollar figure. I'm sure Andrew, Dr. Mayfield will have that number, or Dr. Rankins will have that number. But they got a larger portion than K-12. Of the $169 million, the State Department has the authority to retain 10%. 0.5 of that will be for administrative purposes, and then a 9.5 that we will develop a plan for. And our plan right now is to make sure that we have enough money to give to those districts that are struggling the most. The rest of that money is sent directly to the districts. It flows through MDE. We have no control over that money other than to see that money gets to the districts. The formula that's used is the formula that was used to calculate Title I dollars this year in the 1920 school year. So that same formula is the one that's going to be used to distribute the portion of the money that goes to the districts. Then in addition to that, as the chairman just mentioned, the $1.25 billion was an additional fund that came directly to the state. So we have been in the process of developing a plan. I want to talk to you about that today. What I distributed to you was a guidance document that we gave to all of our districts, because we knew the moment that this all hit, we knew that there were some districts that were going to be able to pivot immediately to online and others that were not. And so we wanted them thinking about what it was going to take to provide a strong online learning program, and that means technology. So what you see in front of you is like a needs assessment, if you will, that the district superintendents at a district level or principals at a local level can walk through. It wasn't anything to send back to us. It was strictly here's to help you. 5 different areas, questions then to walk the team through, And then making sure, though, the last part is a calculator. So if they have done their due diligence, there's a way to calculate what they need. And so that was important because we wanted in the back of their minds, what was it going to take, how much money was it going to take in order to pull this off. We have what I believe is a historic opportunity as a state to bridge this digital divide that exists among children pre-K through grade 12. You know, this health crisis has caused statewide closures, and they have certainly amplified the inequities that our students have. Mississippi is not alone. This is a national issue. This is not just a state issue. Children with no access to computers or tablets at home have been put at a greater disadvantage, obviously. We know, based on an AP article from April of 2020, the percentage of Mississippi households that do not have a computer device ranges from 44% in Greenwood to 8% in Oxford. There's also a huge disparity amongst those districts. Statewide, based on an article from the University of Mississippi, May of 2020, statewide, 32% of households do not have broadband. We have a moral imperative, and I want to say that again. I believe we have a moral imperative to ensure that every child in Mississippi has an equal opportunity to learn, whether they are at home or whether they are at school. Our plan, the Mississippi Succeeds Plan, has been developed to address this issue and bring access to the internet and high-quality instructional materials, another key piece that I'm going to talk about in just a second, to all children. We have been working with the national experts to develop this plan, and we have also sought support from and received, and you will be receiving a letter from the Mississippi Alliance of Nonprofits and Philanthropy, who are in full support of this plan as well. Our plan has basically, I'm going to call it 6 buckets. The first one has to do, obviously, with what we've been talking about earlier today as well, devices and services. That means making sure that we at least get computers or tablets in the hands of all children. Connectivity. Can all children connect to the internet from their homes? Not from a parking lot down the street, but from their homes. The next thing we put into this is make sure that professional development, and not just for teachers. I was on a call with my teacher advisory council of about 200 over 3 different meetings, and the one thing that they're all saying is that we need more professional development where this is concerned. But we also know parents need professional development. So into this plan, we've got to be able to help our parents at home so that they can help their children at home. The fourth bucket has to do with digital curriculum and a learning management system. Not all of our districts have a learning management system. This is a system which you can load high-quality instructional materials, the best in the business, online, and everybody has access to it. Teachers have access to it, students have access to it, parents have access to it. So all districts need a learning management system. Along with this, number 5, you're going to need to be thinking about computer security and support. Simply putting a device in everybody's hand doesn't mean that they know how to really use it, and does not really account for the security that's going to be needed. It was mentioned in a meeting earlier with the House that what do we do about children getting online where they're not supposed to be? Well, that's part of the job of making sure that those tablets have disconnected, John will know the term I'm searching for, but in other words, not allow them to have the ability to go where we don't want them to go. And the last thing I think we really need to think about is telehealth and teletherapy. We've had a lot of children and a lot of adults who are struggling and have social emotional needs. We've got a lot of children that have academic needs that we don't have enough therapists for. So if we could install more telehealth and teletherapy around the state, that would give all children access to that. What we're thinking about doing is offering this for what we call a structured model. The structured choice we would then come up with a list of, for example, districts might have an option to choose between iPads or Chromebooks, let's say at the elementary level, or Chromebooks, MacBooks, or Dell products for the high school. So there's going to be a list that we'll be developing for that. We guesstimate, and this is just a first guess swipe at this, that the initial plan will probably cost about $250 million for startup costs for this first year, and probably an additional $100 million over the next 2 years for license renewals, professional development, and for refreshing and replacing devices. So I think that's something that we need to think about long term. This is a multi-year solution to our gaps in broadband coverage by providing hotspots to homes that don't have high-speed internet, but it's also putting together a framework so that we can work together with districts to meet the needs of their children. It's very important that we do this as a unit because Mississippi will have more influence with businesses that supply these devices and technology services if we work in the aggregate. It's going to be a lot more powerful saying, here is one contract we're coming to you for, than here's 146 contracts we're coming to you for. Other states are already in motion. Most of them are larger states than ours, so supply chain is going to be an issue. So we need to move on this and move on this quickly. We will have more purchasing power as a result. For learning management systems, districts could choose between Google Classroom. I had a lot of teachers on the call that said they use Google Classroom already, Canvas, which is another delivery model, or another platform of their choosing. There are huge advantages to equipping students with technology, whether they're learning at home or in school. One thing that we've really been thinking a lot about, we have a teacher shortage. How can we take advantage of this opportunity to provide high-quality instruction in areas of the state that struggle to find high-quality teachers? Imagine, I've got the state-of-the-art teacher in the northeast section of the state, and the southeast section of the state can't find that same quality instructional teacher. How then can I provide that teacher in the northeast to a classroom in the southeast on a regular basis, solving the need of not having to find that teacher, providing high-quality instruction, and then that superintendent or principal still has money for the teacher that they're looking for? How can we then reward that teacher in the northeast part of the state by taking on additional responsibility? This has huge implications for us as a state in order to be able to put the best and brightest in front of every single student across the state of Mississippi. We also know that we've got to do more to reach students who are our English learners and those who are students with disabilities. That's going to require additional materials. That's going to require additional resources. When we say the plan that we've designed is to meet the needs of all students, I mean that. All means all. All does not mean by some zip codes and not others. There is going to be a continuing need for face-to-face instruction. I heard that from my teachers. Teaching little ones to read, you need them in front of you. So how then do we provide a multimodal approach? Sometimes it can be in face-to-face in small group, sometimes it can be online. We also need to make sure that everybody understands the plan is not one and done. This is the beginning of a plan. All districts, once they even get the devices, there's going to be recurring costs. We need to think about licensing, we need to think about upgrading, and we need to think about replacing equipment. We will continue to be heavily involved in training staff, parents, and teachers. This will be a major lift. I understand that. But there has never been a better opportunity for this state to address the inequities that exist among our students. We've all heard saying that a crisis brings opportunity, but a person's education is life-determining. It does determine and define their future. So this is a life-changing opportunity for the children of Mississippi. We stand prepared to implement this. We stand prepared to work with whatever it takes to get this done. I believe so strongly that I've said to my colleagues, and I'm on calls with them weekly across the United States, I have said this is the silver lining inside COVID-19. This is the silver lining for us to step up as educators and make sure all of our children have the same access to high-quality instruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. If you stand there just for a few minutes, does any member of the committee have any questions for Dr. Wright before she steps down? Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Wright, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned that you've already received, separate from the $1.25 billion that we're studying, about $170 million for education. 90% of that figure goes to the local districts. How much of that money is going to be spent for purposes other than what we're talking about here today, or can that roughly 170 be allocated towards your estimate of $250 million for the first year for distance learning?
There are guidance documents that will be coming from the federal government. We've not received the guidance from the federal government, and nor have we received the money yet. So once I see in my hands exactly what they're saying will be allowed, then I'll be able to be in a better position to answer that for you, Senator.
But you don't anticipate it, so you just don't know what the requirements will be, so you don't know?
No, we don't.
We can't know how to allocate any of that?
No, the allocation, once it gets here, that's solved. That's the formula that was used to distribute their Title dollars, their Title I dollars. So the formula for distribution, we know, but not what's allowed then once that money gets pushed to the districts. I don't know that yet. None of the state chiefs do because we haven't received our money yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Delano, you have any questions?
Thank you. Dr. Wright, you and I had an opportunity to speak earlier this morning about a few issues as it pertained to the connectivity. So I'm going to ask some of the questions for the benefit of the other committee members. Will there be any minimum, or can you tell us or get information to us about what the minimum level of service would be required for your approved LMS systems? So in other words, what are we going to go and ask the internet service providers to provide as a minimum amount of connectivity for our students in our classrooms?
I don't have...
For outside of
Right.
premise.
So I don't have that answer for you as I stand here, but that's part of the nuts and bolts, if you will, of what's underneath this, but I can get that for you. That's not a problem.
Okay, and then one other question. Will the LMS systems require any additional services by the ISP providers? And that would be any additional VPN type services or any other considerations that we need to know about or that we need to take into consideration as we come up with plans and working through the process. And I know I'm putting you on the spot about
John
that right
Freeman
now.
is my CIO, so John will be the better person to answer that question.
So that's one of the questions that we've been working on. My team at the department has been talking with districts. We have a technical advisory committee we've been in conversations with. And they, as we talked to them as of most recently yesterday, and part of the conversation has been the relationship between the devices that are leaving the building and the network that the districts have set up, right? So there's ways of trying to piece together the software, the filters, which I think was the word you're looking for earlier, and the other kind of management tools to make sure that the devices are protected and that the devices that are sent remotely can't bring risk back into the district network. We are going to set up a series of webinars to talk this through with the districts because I imagine that part of it's going to be limited to what is currently available in the districts in terms of hardware and software, what their capacity is, and then what sort of features we can either embed in one of these devices or the other. I think that the more we want to lean on having sort of pre-imaged machines and look for the options or looking for cloud-based options where we can have all of the devices kind of remoting through an area where the filter is applied so that the district is locked, the devices are locked down and can only go through an environment of our choosing and then apply at bulk both software uploads, filters, other protections, and so forth. So we are working through all those and trying to figure out either how to leverage that for the statewide, or whether to be able to provide that through our connection to a subset of districts that are on the consortium for now the Contract 5000 when that comes through, but currently Contract 4000. Did I get your question?
Yes, and will you be able to manage through your LMS all of the SIPA requirements for protection of data, or do you need any additional services from the ISPs to achieve the SIPA compliance?
I suppose it's going to be on our side because everything that the districts put in the network has to be SIPA compliant, and failure to do that will disqualify them for other federal dollars through E-rate. So those requirements are going to need to be protected, and that's actually the first webinar they requested from us was device management and SIPA. So we'll be talking to them on the 21st, so next Thursday, about kind of getting into those issues and working through all the options, models, and capacity challenges that the districts are facing on that. But we do want to make sure that we are not putting that outside of our concern. We want to make sure that's front and center in our concern so we don't disrupt that long-term eligibility for E-rate funds.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Wiggins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Wright, I think we certainly know we need to do this, and you touched on this, can you talk about why, from an education standpoint, we need to be doing this going forward? And to be honest, it's taken a pandemic for us to get to this point. So things being what they are, I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle. But from an education standpoint, can you talk about why this is important? And when I say education standpoint, I mean like educationally, like are we falling behind? Where are we going? And how do we benefit our children?
Well, I think that, I think there's not probably one of us that's sitting in this room. If I came in and said, turn over your iPhone and relinquish your laptop, there'd be this influx of, right? Because that's exactly how we communicate. That's exactly how we obtain information. If you're in college, my nephew lives with me. He's going to Ole Miss. He is online. That is exactly how he is learning and getting all the information for all the papers he's writing, the studying that he's doing. It's all being done online. Now, that's not to say that there's not a place for a teacher, because when I was talking to my teachers on the teacher advisory, one teacher that I talked to, she has literally gone in every day and videotaped. She's an Algebra 2 teacher, amazing teacher, videotaped every single lesson every single day and has put it online so that the children can just go online and watch her actually teach the lesson. So there's a way to do this both ways where I don't have to necessarily be there again. Everything that we're hearing and reading says that we are going to be in this situation again, fall to late fall. I don't think there's anybody medically that's not saying that. So we need to be prepared for this, but we need to be prepared for this period because there could be something that could happen regionally. And I know this is the hurricane season and they're already predicting a worse hurricane. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we need to be prepared for our children, but their future is not going to be in front of an individual teacher all the time. It is going to be online as well as what they're getting in classrooms through lectures and things of that nature. So I think this is 2020. I mean, this is a time that every child should have access not only to the device, but to high quality materials. And that's the other part of it, where we've been providing professional development this past year to our teachers on how to identify high quality instructional materials, how to identify them. Are they meet the standards? Is it of rigor? Is it developmentally appropriate for children? And you've got, the other part of it is you've got teachers, God love them, who are going out and grabbing whatever they can grab off the internet for materials, and we don't want them doing that. That's what an LMS system that you're talking about will provide them. We can load those LMS systems with high quality instructional materials that teachers have access to, parents have access to, and students have access to. So we're not going to have them searching for something. We'll be able to provide them with that. So I feel so strongly about this, and it's just been on my heart. It's been on my heart. It's really been on my heart to see that some children have had the ability to do that and others have not. And we really just need to resolve this. And this is our moment. I believe this. This is our moment as a state, not only for education, because this is also going to help out your community colleges. This is going to help out IHLs, because they're going to have kids online, right? And they're all over the state. So it's not just a K-12 issue. It's really an education issue, pre-K through, 20, right?
Last question, we got Senator Witherspoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Wright, first of all, thank you for all you do. I know it can't be easy doing what you do, so thank you. But my question is, we know, school was interrupted abruptly, and the state testing, the children, did not have to do the state testing. So those children that was in those state testing class, and I had one parent, the child was in the Algebra 1 class, and he was getting ready for the test. And those students that need more of that class, are you looking to the future on that so they could be prepared to take the test and with the other, when the testing and if the testing?
Right. That's part of what we're working on now is not only professional development for teachers, but also the content issues that children may be needing. A lot of superintendents are already in planning summer school and what summer school is going to look like, and it may look like different for everybody else. I've talked to one of my superintendents who's really thinking about trying to move to a year-round school. So 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and all that entails. But I think that we've got to really think about what was the last quarter. But I got to be honest with you, I've told teachers this as well on the phone and in person. I am not recommending that teachers start with the fourth quarter of the prior year when school starts. If you do that, you're never going to catch up. And children need to have their learning accelerated. So I've told teachers, start with the grade level content, Because our standards are built in such a way that they spiral and they build, so that if you start with a grade level content and you're in the middle of teaching, you're going to know which skills kids need more help with. But if I told every teacher to start with fourth quarter, we'd be forever behind. Children would never catch up. And the idea behind that is to accelerate their learning. Remediation does not work. There's years and years of research that remediation does not work. You've got to take kids with grade level content and accelerate their learning from there. And that's been my advice.
I think Senator Norwood, I think we're going to let you be the last person to ask questions, so right now we got
Sure.
Dr. Mayfield.
Sure.
Dr. Wright, in terms of the $170 million, are there provisions in your office or with the school districts to make sure that the needs of the students with special needs are met as a part of that?
Yes, this money is, when it goes to the districts, it's to be used for instructional purposes. And so, I mean, we've got that big broad umbrella underneath that. But we don't have authority over exactly how those monies are spent. I can also tell you, in the buckets for the governor and in our bucket of K-12 and in IHL, there are a lot of reporting responsibilities for this money back to the federal government. And so they're going to give us a, you can spend it on this and you can't spend it on this, because anybody that doesn't spend it on what they're supposed to be spending on will owe the federal government money back, just like they do right now with their title dollars. So we've got to be able to report back to the government in the feds exactly how the money was spent. Now, that's up to each individual district as to how that's spent within the guidelines that we finally will receive from the federal government.
I guess my concern is just to make sure that it's going to be a little bit more expensive for our students with special needs but we don't want them to get left behind.
No, absolutely not. And if there's been one thing that's been lifted up, Senator, is the fact that our little ones with disabilities and our little ones who do not have English as their first language, those are children that have really struggled a lot because they need those individual kinds of attention. And that's what we're working on too, in terms of looking for instructional materials that would be appropriate for them to use even if they were at home.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. I appreciate you coming before the committees. A lot of work to do. The experts tell us that this pandemic or COVID is going to come back in this fall, so look forward to working with your team and this committee to come up with a plan so we can be ready by August when the school year starts. Thank you again, and we'll be looking forward to reaching out to you once more. So, next up, we've got Dr. Mayfield. You'll come on up, please.
Okay, Dr. Mayfield, take it away. We're running a little bit behind, so we'll just let you jump right on in.
All right, thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here before you today. And I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues, Dr. Mary Graham, who is the president of Gulf Coast Community College, and Dr. Jesse Smith, who is the president of Jones College. I know that all of us have faced significant challenges and hardships the last few weeks, and I'm sure that we'll continue to face hardships and challenges as we move forward. I can say that these challenges have provided opportunities for us to think about how we do business, how we educate and train students. From a financial perspective, the colleges have incurred a lot of unbudgeted costs associated with COVID-19 and the response that they've had to make to accommodate students. From an agency and a college perspective, I can say that this disruption has really changed how we think about our work, how we educate our students, how we train people for work, and how we operate in general. I do have a presentation that they are working to pull up right now, but I do want to say that the community colleges overall were positioned very well for this transition. They were positioned because back in 2000, the Mississippi Virtual Community College was realized, and it has grown significantly over time. What I do want to say about what we've done during this time, we've had to really shift how we educate and train all of our students. While we've had the Mississippi Virtual Community College for 20 years now, not every student has enrolled in online classes. Not every faculty member has taught an online course. So therein lies the challenges and additional challenges that I'll talk about. But I can say that the colleges were extremely responsive. They were able to transition very smoothly from face-to-face to online delivery. They were able to do that literally in a matter of an hour, if that, believe it or not. They could do it, and they could do it because we had the infrastructure there to make that happen. Now, when that happened, we did see, of course, a significant load on substitutions. Our career and technical programs, they still require a hands-on component. They are now teaching them using a hybrid model, which does contain an online portion, but then a face-to-face lab component where they bring in students in small groups following the social distance guidelines. Workforce training is another matter altogether. Non-credit workforce training for business and industry and for people who are looking for employment, some of it can be done online, but not all of it. There are still hands-on components that must be done face-to-face and in small groups. We also work very closely with business and industry so that they are able to conduct training on site right there at the company. We call that flow-through. I want to talk just a little bit about some of the waivers and accommodations that we have been forced to make as a result of the pandemic. If we could, I'd like to change the slide too, please. Let's see if this works. There we go. If y'all don't mind, I would rather talk this way with my mask down. Some of the waivers and accommodations include everything from waiving proctored exam requirements. The community colleges require at least 3 proctored exams to support the integrity of the course. In this case, they simply weren't able to do that because students could not physically come to campus to those distance learning labs to take those exams. We also waived career and technical assessments, again, because those assessments are given in a face-to-face setting. They require strict observation. They require authentication that the student is the student when they are taking those types of assessments. The colleges canceled all events, as you well know. They closed the dorms. Refunds and credits were given. Same thing with the cafeteria, refunds and credits. I can't tell you what a burden, a financial burden, that has been on the community colleges. Additionally, they've had to deep clean the campus because safety is always a priority. Safety is first. They were able to deliver uninterrupted instructional components because they made do. They were innovative with what they had. They turned around their wireless access points, pointed them to the parking lot so that folks could drive up and go to class in their car. That was the only way for them to access those wireless connections. Vendors, we worked very closely with vendors across the state to get services half price, or even free for the past 2 months to do what we had to do in the short term. The colleges really took extra steps to loan laptops out to students, even employees. Again, people were not accustomed to telework or taking courses online in all cases. And the transition process really, we had significant challenges. While it was very seamless to populate Canvas, as I said, it took an hour, maybe even less to do that because we had that infrastructure. We still had to address the hands-on components. We had to address things such as nursing and our allied health. How were we going to finish clinicals? Could we use our simulations to do that? And we did. Again, we had faculty that never taught online. That was a significant challenge. So for them to develop course content, learn how to navigate the course, develop assignments, assessments, and all of the things that are necessary to teach online, that required additional time, additional support, and still they were new at the process. Students not having had online courses had the same challenges, whether it was to navigate the course. The biggest challenge, I'll say, is connectivity. Connectivity is by far the most difficult challenge that we've had to overcome with students. And again, the drive-up parking lot, the drive-up Wi-Fi was one mechanism that we used to do that. We felt like students were accustomed to coming to the campus, so why not drive up, be isolated in your car, and have Wi-Fi connectivity. Also, we had significant challenges with employees and students having access to the technology. I just mentioned that the colleges loaned laptops to students. They did, because students didn't have them. Employees didn't have them to work from home. Employees didn't have printers to work from home. So all of these things are extremely important. What the colleges did, we did deploy a survey to find out really what are the challenges, what are students having issues with. When we look at our online enrollments, we see that they quadrupled during this time, again because we transitioned everybody. So it was a huge load to the system. While we transitioned everyone, not everyone was prepared. Not faculty, not every student. From there, we looked at different things. When we looked at performance rate, we saw that high number of failures. We had more failures, we had more withdrawals, we had more incompletes. And again, it just goes back to the fact that they've never taken an online class in some cases. Faculty have never taught an online class in some cases. So that's why we saw such an increase in failure, withdrawal rates, etc. When we looked at dual enrollment, which we have a significant number of students that are in high school but also dual enrolled at the community college, we did see that there was a higher number of failure rates, a higher number of withdrawal rates. And we have been able to address those, or we're working to address those in many ways. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith, who is going to talk about some of the challenges that our students and employees, our faculty to be specific, what did they report? And what are we going to do to address those gaps?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Mayfield. So just to hit some high points here real quick, we did a survey of the colleges to find out just what were some of the specific challenges. Being in the midst of the massive change we were facing every day, we would set a plan and it would change. Of course, that was the norm for all of us. So once we made the transition to move all of these courses in their online format or their hybrid format, so just how successful were we? Well, what we discovered was that there was a large group of people that were underserved, As you can see, one of our mission is a part of our mission is to educate those adult students who didn't earn a high school credential. And we found that only 25% of those that were able to make the transition into the adult ed program were able to participate. 48% of all of our college students, all majors, required some level of tutoring, more so than you would see on campus. 57% of our students need some type of Wi-Fi unit at home. 25% of them needed laptops. Most of the colleges were able to pull together resources and have a loan program, etc. 72% of all of our students were concerned about their data plan. I think the question was, what is the minimal speed that we need in order to run Canvas? A minimum speed to run Canvas is 6 megabits per second. 6 megabits per second is the minimum it takes. But we really need approximately 50, considering all of the speed and all of the traffic that's going through us. 38% of our employees didn't have enough connectivity at home to teach, and about 28% of employees lacked some technology, computer, to be able to support those students when they were at home. Some of the needs that we do need to address also, and I will be really quick, is that we do need to enhance our connectivity. We need broadband terribly. If you look at certain pockets of the state, we can't do any of this through the K through 12, university system, community colleges, can't be done unless we have some way to get the data there and to get it back. Not only do we need the strong signal coming in with high bandwidth coming in, we got to have the same upload ability. Students have to complete their assignments and be able to send it back. We used WebEx, we used Zoom. All of those things are very important to us, but they're only effective unless we have that. So currently the community college system is transitioning into the online mission network, and there are going to be some added costs regarding to making that structural change and moving so. And so those are some of the gaps and the needs that we're facing. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Graham, to make some more remarks.
Good afternoon. I'll try to get quickly to the point. We concur with K through 12. We feel like the broadband and connectivity is of the utmost importance for the state of Mississippi. We can change lives in Mississippi. You'll take care of your telehealth problems. You'll take care of college completion, literacy, small business, large business, commerce. All of that can be addressed through connectivity. So let me tell you, we're not new to the game of online instruction. We've been doing it at your community colleges. The situation we have is many of us have been doing it to the extent of about 30% of our enrollment. So our systems are not geared to do what we're doing now, which is 97 to 99% online instruction. And so, Scott, you asked a question about VPN and those associated services, and that's what I want to talk to you about, because we deliver a product, and that product has to be good, but we have to ensure that the person behind the computer is the person that's taking the test and getting the credit. So there's some integrity issues. So there's some things like test proctoring and things like that to ensure that the online learning is effective and that knowledge base is acquired by the person who is actually taking the class. And so there's a lot of associated needs that go along with that. There's test proctoring, there's learning lab assistance, there's library resources, all of those things that we're offering through our community colleges. Again, about a third of our enrollment. So our systems have to be backfilled and updated to accommodate that large number we're lifting online in the event that there is a resurgence of this situation. Your community colleges are going to look different, because when we move and launch this tremendous effort to go online, it's not like you take a biology class and flip it online. It's a whole new pedagogy, a whole new methodology. You have to make sure you design a class online that's as effective as an in-person class. And so we're asking for instructional designers, people to help us, to come in. You talk about the immediate needs, that's an immediate need. We need staff to come in to help support. You need tutoring. Community colleges serve an interesting demographic. People want that one-on-one interaction. And so we're going to need to wrap those support services around our online instruction to ensure that students are successful. Dr. Mayfield showed you some of the withdrawals. The students who have traditionally been online students have connectivity. That's why they decided to be online. It's that other 75% that may or may not have connectivity, so we want to do that. But the real challenge I want to address today, or another challenge, is workforce training. Folks, it's hard to teach welding online. You just can't do it. So your community colleges have continued to offer multiple sections, smaller groups, so that we could accommodate these students, following all the cleaning protocols and all the things we needed to do to ensure that they got the skills they need to go right into the workforce. There is some technology, though, that can address this. It's called virtual reality, augmented reality. It's costly, but it's needed in your community colleges, and the learning and the technology can be shared with the K through 12 for their career and technical training as well. Community colleges can train people through virtual, and we can train people to create virtual models. So it's a great opportunity to do some things like that. Dr. Wright mentioned the community colleges, universities had gotten money from the feds. Let me tell you that half of our dollars are direct pass-through to students. We have to send that money straight to students. We can't use it to pay off any debt they owe us. It has to go straight through. So the community colleges received about $64 million. The other half has to directly be used for costs associated with COVID-19. And so I'm telling you, the restrictions are very rigorous, and we're all trying to work through that to make sure on the back end we don't have an audit exception. Also want to talk to you again about the broadband and the importance of that. We're very much in support of that. We need, in addition to connectivity, we need some new technology. The virtual reality, the augmented reality technology is important to us. We want to make sure that we can continue to do the workforce training. We're going to be the economic stimulus. We are the answer to restarting the economy because we're training your healthcare workers, the welders, the carpenters, truck drivers, but we need the technology to do that. So I'll just leave you with the answer, of course, the bottom line answer is broadband. That connectivity is critical for the state of Mississippi. Those associated costs, we need to backfill and stand up our systems. Again, we're not new to online, but we are new to the massive amount of online that we have to push out. So we just asked you today to support our efforts. We've estimated about $75 million a year for the community college, 75 this year, 75 next year. So you're asking for short-term and long-term. Those costs will cover all of that for your community college. We're open to questions. I hurried through this because I know you guys are trying to stay on a timeline. Thank you.
President Graham, if you could tell us the $75 million that you're estimating, is that to provide the broadband that you're talking about and the hardware, or that's just the augmented services at the community college?
That's all the associated cost to deliver online in the capacity that needs to be done, and some of the virtual reality opportunities there and all those associated services. Broadband is going to need to happen. Broadband's as important as electricity or water to most of us.
If we have a finite amount of dollars, would you agree with me that the first step is to provide the broadband access before we start talking about hardware and software and all these other things? Because if you have that and you can't connect, it's really not going to do you any good, is it?
Absolutely. You know, we're going to have to devise a way to put a tool in the hands of these students once they get the broadband, and that could be everything from if you're enrolled in K through 12 or a community college or university, we provide you with a computer, a laptop, or a family gets that service in their home. That's going to be the answer to that. Start with connectivity, give them the tools they need, give your community colleges the wraparound dollars to make sure the online is effective and that we can also do workforce and career and technical training. It's kind of a step-by-step process. You need short-term answers, though. Some of those associated things we can go ahead and do now. Broadband's going to take a minute to do. We realize that, but your community colleges have set up Wi-Fi hotspots on our campuses and things like that. So for the short run, if we can put those tools in their hand, if we loaned out 300 laptops. So if we can get students a tool, they can drive on campus for the short run or go to McDonald's or go to wherever that has Wi-Fi. but we've got to get the broadband access throughout the state. That's going to be your long-term.
Is it your idea of the summer just to stay online with your courses and then try to get back to in-class in the fall?
That is the goal, but I'm going to tell you, we have dorms, we have food service, and so we're going to be limited on those. And I need to share with y'all too, close to 50% of a community college revenues that we use to support our budget is from tuition and fees. Those have been diminished because, people are dropping out and things like that. So we're unlike K through 12, where the majority of their budget is state and local. We rely on tuition because we produce a product, which is an educated student. They pay tuition to get that. And so we've got to help generate some of that revenue to offset the cost of doing business. So we're going to need some help with that.
And what are you seeing in terms of the enrollment projections due to the coronavirus?
Well, anecdotally, right now, we're really concerned that the projections are going to be down. Historically, when more people are unemployed, our enrollment goes up.
Right.
But we don't know at this point what that looks like because, the learning landscape has changed.
So I might be more of the optimist. I think it's going to go up. And let me tell you why. Because we're a third of the cost of higher ed. And so students are going to want to stay home and take online classes and go to their local community college because they feel safe. So we want y'all to plan for an enrollment increase to help us backfill our systems.
Okay. All right. Since we are running so far behind right now, if you ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here, don't mind hanging out, we're going to bring our IHL folks on in and let them get through their presentation. We may do questions at the end for all of you all, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, Dr. Rankins, come on down.
Good afternoon, and first of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the leadership in the Senate for allowing me to come and share a little information about some of our challenges we have in our university system as we've made this conversion to online learning as a majority of the way we deliver course content. I'll go ahead and move into the slides and we'll catch up as they get loaded. Our university has made the decision to switch to online courses in mid-March after considering how spring break travel for students and faculty would affect our campus and the spread of the virus on our campuses. Our faculty worked very hard to convert face-to-face classes to online and had about a week to do so during the extended spring break period. We spent the bulk of that time training our faculty on delivering courses online. As you've heard before, although we've been offering courses online for some time now, that doesn't involve all faculty and all students. And we have faculty on our campuses. They may be great biology teachers face-to-face and horrible biology teachers online, and they need to be trained. So thanks to our dedicated faculty and staff and a lot of extensive work over a short period of time, our students were able to complete the fall semester through this altered delivery format. And I want to say overall I'm pleased with how our campuses handled the transition. However, we had a lot of challenges, and I'll share some of those with you. So on slide 3, the major challenges we saw were around the lack of technology and internet access across our campuses. That was consistent when we surveyed all of our campuses. In many cases, students were sharing a computer with other family members who were working from home or siblings who were doing their schoolwork online. Some students have outdated computers or outdated software that makes completing coursework difficult. And many students were trying to complete their coursework on cell phones because they didn't have computers. Many of our students Particularly our resident students were living in homes with no internet connectivity at all, or in geographical regions without reliable internet access. And I'll say one statement to really bring home a common theme and a common problem that you've heard throughout the afternoon. The most common response we got from the universities when they surveyed their students, we had many students that were driving to McDonald's and other fast food restaurants, sitting in the parking lot because they couldn't go inside and doing their coursework. And I can tell you, I witnessed this twice at Walmart while I pulled up beside a car that had students sitting in the car. They had their textbooks on the dashboard and trying to complete their coursework online. We have a serious issue that we're hopeful that your leadership will help us address. I want you to take a look at this map. 51% of Mississippi resident students at our universities that were enrolled this past academic year were from rural counties. Those are the counties you see in yellow, as defined by the Office of Management and Budget. At 4 of our institutions, Alcorn State, Delta State, MUW, and Mississippi Valley State, 75% of their Mississippi resident students live in rural counties. Quality, high-speed internet access is necessary to support streaming videos, video conference calls like Zoom, which are very limited in these rural counties. On the next slide, 10% of our resident students are from counties where less than 2 in 10 households have internet connections, and 44% of our resident students are from counties where less than 4 in 10 households have internet connections. We know that there will be significant challenges for our universities to safely bring back our students in the fall. As we hope and prepare to be able for that to happen, we need help from you to build the infrastructure and capacity to continue distance learning through the summer and beyond if necessary. We look forward to working with you to ensure that our institutions have the resources to provide quality distance learning and that our students and faculty have the technology needed in order to ensure quality instruction. Some other challenges, and you've heard these before, around faculty training. Some of our faculty had little to no experience teaching remotely, and they need training, and that training needs to be ongoing. Also, many of our students were not accustomed to taking their courses 100% online, which means our students need additional academic support to help them progress in those courses. Thirdly, keeping our students engaged in online courses was a challenge for us because there's limited access to students with their peers and also limited access for students interacting with their instructors. And lastly, many other organizations, we have the challenge of our students, particularly our non-traditional students who have kids of their own, who are juggling childcare and literally homeschooling their kids as well as trying to complete their college coursework. Our plans for the summer are to offer the lion's share of our courses online at all 8 of our institutions. There are some exceptions with some graduate courses and clinical experience in labs within a small number of our courses. And our institutions are working throughout the summer to expand online resources for students and also to expand training for our faculty. As we prepare for the fall semester, we're hoping that we'll be able to bring our students back to campus to some extent. Ideally, that would be all of our students on campus, or some blend of having some face-to-face instruction and maybe have some of our larger section courses offered online, but that's going to be dependent on where we are in the fall and the guidance we receive at the state and federal level. We're working to try to upgrade hardware and software for our online platforms to support synchronous learning and to be able to offer video streaming of our lectures to our students to improve the academic experience in offering these courses remotely. We're doing all of this knowing that it may be necessary at some point in the fall semester to shift back to 100% online offerings. In addition to upgrading university technology, we must consider the needs of faculty and students in continuing offering these courses online. Some of these needs, as mentioned by our community college peers, may include updated laptops, updated software, and Wi-Fi hotspots. In rural areas, we're also helping our students identify locations where they can get internet access, like our county extension offices and other places where public Wi-Fi is available. I'll talk a little bit about our expenses. Overall, our universities expect to have about $86.6 million in expenses related to COVID-19, and that's from spring break running through December 31st of this year.
Tell us what that entails. Tell us what that entails, if you don't mind.
Okay. And I'm glad you asked that question because I want to qualify that from a institutional side, that mainly includes personal protective equipment for our campuses and paid leave for our employees. A big chunk of that is additional expenses associated with paid leave. That's about $57 million of that $86.6 million. And we're anticipating approximately $7.5 million is needed for additional expenses to handle technology upgrades to ensure that we have effective and efficient delivery of our online classes.
Can you tell us about the money you received directly from the federal government and how that was spent?
So the dollars received directly to our institutions is going to be about $65 million. There's another $35 million that's really flow-through money that goes directly to emergency grants for students. So the dollars that the institutions will have access to will be about $65 million.
What's that money going to be spent for?
Well, right now, as Dr. Wright pointed out earlier, we're still waiting on final guidance to come from the federal government. We know the formula and how those dollars are to be distributed, but the exact purposes of those monies, we're still waiting to get a final guidance from the feds.
But you understand our situation that you're asking for $86.6 million from the state, from the federal monies we received, and you've already received $65 million directly from the federal government. Before we can make an educated decision on how to spend the money we have, we would need some guidance as to how you plan to spend the money you've already directly received.
That's understood. And as we get that guidance, we'll pass that information on to the body and the legislative staff. I will say that the $86.6 million, that's additional expenses that we have. But if you look at the loss in revenue with our university system, and that's just from spring break through December 31, those numbers are around $300 million. And that doesn't include losses in athletics revenue.
Can you tell us about the enrollment projections you're seeing for the summer and fall?
Similar to the community colleges, we know that a lot of families in this state and across the U.S., they're suffering financially, and we think that's going to have, at this point, likely a negative impact on enrollment, which again, that would be another pot of money where we may see some significant losses in revenue because, roughly about 60% of our budgets come from tuition and revenue that we receive from students.
Thank you, Dr. Rankins. We're going to take some questions. I know we're running a little behind on time, but I'm told that our bill is not yet ready, so we're okay on time. All right, Senator Witherspoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Rankins, do you have an estimate amount how much you would lose on housing?
Yes, I do. The housing losses that we expect, and this is assuming that in the fall, if we have to be 100% online and we don't have our students living in our residence halls, we believe that the losses on housing, and let me get my glasses back out because I can't see. That's going to be about $72 million. That's assuming if we have to be 100% online in the fall, and that's housing and meal plan losses.
Okay, and another question. Does your tuition go down if it goes online for the fall?
Right now, our tuition per credit hour will be the same. We have not had any discussions regarding reducing tuition, but I will tell you some institutions have looked at offering assistance for students to enroll in summer school to promote those students staying enrolled and engaged to help facilitate them continually being enrolled into the fall semester.
And the reason why I asked that question is because with the junior colleges, I've heard comments where, instead of pay all that money, a lot of students are outing to go to junior colleges instead of, so that's why I asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Senator DeBar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Rankins, I guess this whole pandemic brought an issue up. Can your business model change now? I mean, do we need the brick and mortar buildings and so forth? Now that we're going to more of these online classes, can we refocus the money or the funds toward online programs, upgrading our technologies and so forth to keep the cost for a college education down? Is that something that you guys have looked at and thought of this as an opportunity to move forward on?
I would say that there will be some changes to the business model, but I don't think they will be dramatic changes because what we've learned throughout this experience is students, they greatly prefer face-to-face instruction over online instruction, and they're clamoring. I mean, literally beating the doors down, trying to get back on campus. So I would say in the future, online learning will supplement face-to-face instruction and will be a part of our reality, but I don't think it's going to ever replace face-to-face instruction, and I think there's going to be a place for brick and mortar university campuses.
I would agree with that. My son's ready to get back out of the house and back on campus. I don't know if it's because he wants to go back to school or he wants to get away from mom and dad, but we would appreciate a lower cost of the tuition, that's for sure. But I just think it's an opportunity to maybe look at refocusing, and if there are more kids that want to do online classes, then that could help reduce some of the cost and maybe alter your business model going forward.
And we've already started to look at that to some extent already when we look at our long-range facility planning. More and more universities are shying away from building new dormitories and making that investment. So some of that to some extent has already started. But for, a lot of the positives you see with that rich campus environment, I think there'll always be a place for brick and mortar university campuses.
All right, Chairman Polk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Rankins, thank you. My question about the $65 million is this: is that an amount that will be given to the IHL board to disperse among the universities, or will there be universities, is that money split up some way where there'll be different amounts going to different universities without IHL board approval?
No, sir. The IHL board has no say-so in how those monies are distributed. Those monies do not come to IHL. Those monies come directly to the universities in the form of grants. And the feds have prescribed a formula for how those dollars are dispersed. And no, each university is not getting the exact same amount. It's based on formulas that have been developed at the federal level.
If you could you tell us who's going to get the most and who's going to get the least of these dollars?
Yes.
Remember, he represents Southern Mississippi.
So there are two separate pots of money going to the universities. There's a pot of money that goes to all 8. That total is $35 million, and I can give you the amounts per institution. Alcorn State is about 2.9, Delta State 1.2, Jackson State 4.2, Mississippi State 8.9, MUW 1 million, Mississippi Valley 1.5 million. I promise you I'm not a ventriloquist. Okay, the University of Mississippi, University of Mississippi will receive 8.3 and Southern Miss 6.7. Now, there's another pot of money that's allocated to minority serving institutions, and only 6 of our 8 universities will receive some of that money. Alcorn State will receive 7.9, Delta State 125,000, Jackson State 17 million, Mississippi State will not be receiving any of those funds, MUW about 106,000, Mississippi Valley 4.3 million, the University of Mississippi won't be receiving any of those funds, and Southern Miss will receive about 658,000.
So our historic black universities will probably come out with more money than our the other 5 universities.
Well, if you look at the total amount, Jackson State will receive the most at 21 million, followed by Mississippi State at 8. Well, followed by Alcorn State with 10.8 and Mississippi State at 8.9.
Thank you, Doctor.
Senator Sparks?
Thank you, Chairman. The couple of questions that are for you and community college people who are still here. The first question on Senator, the question was asked earlier about the credit rates. I know you maybe were talking about what you're going to do going forward, but at the beginning of this school year, was the per hour rates for online classes the same as on campus, or were they different?
Well, our tuition is it's a semester tuition based model in our system, so the price is the same whether you're taking a course online or face to face.
You mentioned $35 million that would be grants to students. What is that meant to cover?
That money is meant to cover any expenses that students incur due to COVID-19.
And then the question, and it's for both community colleges and yourself, I won't have to answer for them, but paid leave is the bulk of the request that you made. Who is the paid leave? Which employees are we talking about? How is that calculated?
It's calculated based on the hours that those employees were placed and potentially could be placed if it's done the way it was in the spring, if it's done this way in the fall, the hours that they were placed on administrative leave because they were deemed non-essential employees to work from home.
So did the university supply the PPP to pay these individuals? Did you pay them? Because when you say paid leave, you're implying or expressly stating that the university is in fact paying these people. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did they apply for PPP in these universities?
What, you have to tell me what PPPs.
Payroll protection, in other words, have the universities, have they received money already from the federal government in payment of those leave?
No.
And are these hourly employees, are these faculty, are these administrators, or is it a mix?
It's a mix.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have the same question for community college.
Dr. Mayfield or Dr. Smith, whoever wants to field that question, or both?
I can answer from the board perspective, and no one was on administrative leave from the community college board. They are all teleworking. So we of course did not receive any comments.
But we have a request for 26 million in 20 and 21 combined, along with 56 million from IHL for paid leave to employees.
That probably comes from the community college.
Dr. Smith, can you answer that question?
Yes, I think there's a multitude of questions within that one question. So if we can begin specifically, maybe I can help answer your question. Let's begin with the PPP. We're not eligible for those funds, number one. The paid leave, all right? So we, as you know, the COVID-19 from the original act that came out, we were afforded 80 hours of paid leave, so to speak, that we were required to give. So anybody that was not able to make the transition from, in our case, and most likely from the university system as well, anybody that can transition their work from home, they didn't have to utilize that COVID leave. Anyone that could not do their work from home, or they weren't capable of doing their work from home, for instance, someone who couldn't do their administrative work because they didn't have access to internet, etc., or they may have been caring for someone, a child or children, all of these factors, they would have utilized COVID-19 leave. As you know, the crisis, the state of emergency lasted beyond that. And so we chose to go ahead and pay those employees their full salaries and benefits while they were at home and not able to work. So those are the things that are listed in this spreadsheet that you receive colleges.
Thank you. You answered the other part of the question. So 80 hours of this having been compensated or will be from the federal government is the anticipation?
No, sir. We do not expect to receive any reimbursement on the COVID-19. The law requires that you must provide 80 hours of paid leave. Is the way it's written.
Yes. All right, Senator Aiken? Boyd?
There is a significant disparity, and I know all community colleges are different, and they have different size faculty, but when you look at the amount of paid leave, there's significant disparity here between those numbers. Could you provide us kind of more of a detailed explanation of what that disparity in those numbers are? Because, you know, by several $1 million, there's disparity among the community colleges.
I'm happy to speak to that, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, but the institutions being autonomous in nature, they have different employees that perform different functions, and they're all of different sizes, all 15. And the disparity comes into play because depending on what their role and responsibilities are, some of those were on administrative leave and some were not. It was up to the institution based on their role. The disparity comes into play because they're all different, and the number of employees affected that are receiving pay are different.
Is it specific to one particular college that you're looking at?
Yes.
There's several unpaid that there's significant disparity. If you can take a look at that, and if you wouldn't mind providing back to the committee the numbers, that particularly that we're looking at, I think it would help us in evaluating the implementation, because there is huge disparity in those numbers there. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask the specific, because I know,
Is it a follow-up to this
yes,
one?
to that
Sure,
one.
go for it.
So what I think she's getting at, which is what a lot of us are, so in FY 2021, Itawamba Community College has asked for $6.7 million in paid leave. My own Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College has asked for 3.3, when everybody else is in the 200 to 400,000 range. So why is there such a discrepancy between, in particular, those two, and then for FY 20 is the same 3 million and I guess same kind of thing.
Right,
So,
right. I just communicated with the president there at Itawamba, and I can't speak exactly for what he would answer, but his answer was they put together a projection based upon what they understood and was needed for the data, and it clearly is outside the norm of the rest of those, but I think it's based upon what they use for their forecasting model is the only thing I can imagine. The way we calculated ours at Jones was based upon the actual leave that we anticipate to have to pay in that short period of time. So that's the best answer I can get you, but we'll get you the specific
yes,
answer.
to
sir.
Senator Boyd's question,
Absolutely.
I think that would
I
help.
think that's a very plausible question.
Senator Boyd, did that finish your question? All right, Senator McClendon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to go with that, the telework capabilities for employees, the others went up where that one was one of the lowest.
No, I can't answer that question,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, but we can get more information for you. Yes, sir.
All right, any other questions? If not, thank you all for being here. We're going to turn it back over to Chairman DeBar for our next presenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think our last presenter, I know we're running behind, but I think we got time, is Matt Dolan. Supposed to be on the Zoom. Matt is from the Global Teaching Project, and he's going to give us some information on distance learning and some of the things that he has done in the past. Key him up. Mr. Dolan.
If we could just go away with the hand if you can hear me. Okay, good, perfect, thank you. Well, thank you, Chairman DeBar, Vice Chairman Blunt, Chairman Parks, Vice Chairman Fleming, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to learn from the other folks who have presented testimony. In particular, I want to recognize the work of Dr. Wright and her in the Mississippi Department of Education, and thank her for her leadership. My name is Matt Dolan, and I am the CEO of the Global Teaching Project. So for the last 3 years, we have implemented a program to mitigate educational disparities by providing promising high school students from rural Mississippi access to the advanced STEM courses they need to achieve their full potential. But their research schools otherwise would not offer both because of a lack of resources, and as members of the committee appreciate a severe shortage of qualified teachers. We currently conduct 20 classes in 15 schools in 11 districts across the Delta, Northeast, and Central Mississippi. Our inaugural course is Safety Physics 1, in which we have added 8 computer science principles. We plan to scale our effort further and to continue to Mississippi Public Schools already physics won by 50% from 2017 levels. 2017, 2018 was our first year. Among public schools serving the Mississippi counties with the 30 highest school poverty rates, our schools are the only ones that operate e-physics. And internationally as well, the College Board authorizes over 6 high schools.
I believe we stipulate the need for broadband in section.
So I'm very grateful for committee for focusing on critical issues of learning and rural broadband access. I do not presume to be a technical expert, but perhaps I can be of some use by sharing my observations based on many visits to schools throughout the state over the past 3 years. First and foremost, our experience has been from the premise is there are extremely bright students throughout Mississippi who, if given quality instruction and sufficient academic supports, are capable of excelling academically, and that is really a wonderful finding. Something we suspected, but we have since confirmed. For example, Mississippi State reported that students who attended our summer residential program, quote, achieved dramatic gains in substantive understanding of course content according to nationally recognized pre- and post-program assessments, close quote. The second bit of positive news is it is possible to deliver the high-quality instruction and extensive academic supports to rural Mississippi. And our program has developed a template for doing so. Also, we have found that some of the nation's leading educators and top STEM tutors, again from schools like Yale, MIT, University of Virginia, Stanford, other places, they are very eager to work with Mississippi students if provided the means to do so. The news, however, is not all good. Internet access, even in schools that nominally are connected, remains often poor. I have observed firsthand that at many of our schools, the internet is extremely unreliable. As a consequence, I have seen classes huddle around a single cell phone to observe the tutoring session, something I've observed many times, or more often simply fail to connect. An example that unfortunately comes to mind is last school year, U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos asked to observe our program and at my suggestion visited Holmes Central High School in Holmes County. And we worked for weeks and spent considerable sums to ensure that the internet service there, which we knew to be temperamental, worked during her visit, yet despite those efforts, we still could not get it to work as we had hoped. However, if the committee chooses to move forward, I just wanted to highlight a couple things. It is critical, again, I'm not a technical expert, but there are 3 criteria that I think the committee really needs to keep in mind. Megabit capacity per student, and critically, because this is an issue I know our schools have run into, that capacity needs to be available during peak periods, not just in the middle of the night. Reliability, which is something I have observed, as they say quite often, our schools need internet they can count on. I know at one of our schools, for example, if it rains, they lose their internet. And then ubiquity. Internet, and I heard Dr. Wright address this. Internet needs to go to every addressable location within a service area. Even if our schools have flawless internet, our ability to provide instruction is greatly impeded by a lack of home internet access. That's a particular problem in rural areas where students often cannot stay after school because they need to get the bus home. We need to be able to work with them when they are at home as well. So that, and just as a note, it has been stressed to me the importance of developing an accurate map of current internet service to identify the areas in which additional service needs to be extended. I recognize that creating a network that meets all of those 3 criteria involves considerable time and expense. things that can be done in the immediate future and at no cost that really could confer a benefit. In particular, our schools need to have a much better understanding about the steps they can take to mitigate current shortcomings. When the coronavirus hit, we advised our schools that we were willing to pay for some or all of the internet connections, hotspots, and devices that our students needed to learn remotely. All we asked is that our schools advise us of what was available, what they recommended, and how much it cost. Yet, despite considerable efforts over several weeks, our schools were unable to find answers to those questions in most cases. And as a consequence, we have been unable to reach some of our students during the school closures. And finally, I just wanted to touch base on the issue of funding. Again, I know very little about technology, but I have worked on federal tax and budget matters for over 25 years, first as a staff attorney in the U.S. Senate, and subsequently in the private sector. In addition to the CARES Act, because again, we're not here to ask for CARES Act funding. That is not our focus. We're not here, frankly, to ask for funding at all. But we are seeking to be helpful in identifying sources of funding, and there are numerous federal proposals to fund rural broadband that are under active consideration. It is important that whatever package emerges, it prioritizes service to areas of greatest need, and that such need be determined based on factors that are particularly evident in Mississippi. Now, Senator Wicker, Senator Hyde-Smith, and Congressman Thompson have been very attentive to our initiative and are working hard on behalf of the state. I hope to work with members of these committees, your committees, and the state congressional delegation to help ensure that Mississippi gets the help it needs. So thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I'm obviously happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Due to time constraints, we're going to provide the written testimony and everything, that was statement that he made today to the members. Obviously, we know technology has advantages as well as disadvantages, and if it has bugs in the city of Jackson, and then imagine how bad it is in our rural areas. So, perfect example of that today. So, unless any member has anything, we're going to wrap this meeting up and then recess, and then I guess reconvene the energy and technology at 2:45. All right. So, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming.
All right, we're going to call this joint meeting to order with the Senate Energy Committee and Technology Committee. We have Chairman Delano joint presiding over this with me. I want to thank everyone for being here today. The conversation that we're going to have is about connectivity, which correlates with our whole district's learning initiative. We have several different people that are going to present today. I did want to make a couple remarks. When we talk about rural broadband, it's a two-part conversation. Right now, we're focused on how can we provide connectivity for students in the next upcoming school year. The rural broadband conversation is a more lengthy discussion, and there's a bunch of other factors involved, and that's something that we cannot fully achieve by the next school year. So what we've asked people to come in front of the committee that are involved and can help us come up with a solution as to how we get our children in a position to where they can learn from home in the event that this virus comes back in the fall. With that, I'm going to yield to Senator Delano for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee and members of the guests that are here, just wanted to kind of give you an update or give you some kind of an overview and a goal that I think that we've tried to line out for this discussion to frame our discussions here today. And I wanted to come up with some type of a mission statement. And with that, I've said that we wanted to make sure that every single public school student and teacher has an equal opportunity to achieve distance learning by September 1 of 2020. And that's consistent with what the House had mentioned this morning. So if you think about the discussion that we have today in the context of how do we achieve distance learning by September 1 of this year, it boils down very quickly to what are the technologies that are available for providing connectivity, and then also what is really the scope of this discussion. We've got to make some assumptions, and one of the assumptions that I think is easiest for us to make is that our educational partners in our state, whether it be MDE in our local school districts, the community colleges, or IHL, they're coming up with their own content and their own networks or their own applications for delivering content. What we're looking at is when the student leaves the campus or is away from campus, how are they going to be able to achieve that distance learning? And it should be done in a way that it's equal for every single student. Everyone should have that equal right. So today, as we go forward and we start talking to our presenters today, there are a couple of things that I would like to look for, and that is what are the technologies available from the private sector to provide connections to the school's learning management systems across the entire state. And then understanding that not all households will have a broadband connection available to that household, how will students achieve the equal opportunities for district learning? And what are the technologies that are available that you can provide to provide that connectivity when it's not available at a house? And then many of you are already providing services across the state. We're relying on the school districts to provide that content, like I had said earlier. But what are the other considerations that our committee members should think about and be aware of regarding connectivity and related services from the experiences that you've gathered from the field? So those are the things that I'd really like for us to focus on today. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, if you're okay, we will go ahead and ask Commissioner Presley and Dane Maxwell from the Public Service Commission to come up and give us a presentation. Mr. Chairman, if you're okay with this, we'd like to try to keep our discussions to 15, 20 minutes at the very most, and then we would like to open the floor up for members to ask questions of our presenters.
I know it's going to be hard for Commissioner Presley. He's pretty passionate about this subject.
Don't cut me off, Mr. Chairman, if it go too long. Thank you, Chairman Carter and Chairman Delano. I appreciate first and foremost your two dedication to this issue. We've worked together on this in the past, and the dedication of this legislature has been strong on connectivity and making sure that we bridge the digital divide in Mississippi that we know exists, we know that it's deep, we know that it's dark, and we know that in fact there are solutions that we can put on the table today that our providers are working on, plans that are bold, plans that are futuristic, and plans that will meet the needs of Mississippi, not just in a temporary fashion, but can be pandemic proof, that can be economic recession proof, that can bridge the divide in rural Mississippi in a way in which 20 years from now we look back and say we did something bold at a time in which we could do it, we made the right decisions. Now here are the facts. You heard our education professionals come up time after time after time in the previous hearing. And the one thing that every one of them agreed on was that you can hand a child a brand new Chromebook, you can give them a brand new iPad, give them the greatest device in the world, and it's worth nothing if they cannot connect to internet service. We all agree on that. Senator Sparks said we can stipulate to that pretty quick. Here are the facts in Mississippi. The rosiest picture that you can find, the best case scenario that you can find in our state related to which areas have access and which don't, would be the FCC's broadband map. That map is flawed. That map overstates coverage. We know, for instance, recently the largest carrier in Mississippi admitted to the fact that they have overstated nationwide 3,000 census blocks that have broadband, in Mississippi 184. We know that other carriers, the announcements are coming pretty soon, that the maps are wrong and there has been an overstatement of broadband. But if just for a minute, test one is how many people in Mississippi by population have access to internet service, here are the facts. The FCC puts out an annual report on broadband. And so for year 2018, the report came out in 2019, it said that using the FCC's definition of 25/3, 25 download, 3 upload, fixed broadband. And when we say fixed, it's very important to remember this. That includes satellite, that includes fixed wireless, that includes DSL, that includes traditional wired services. That's their definition of fixed. Some of those services are subpar, some of them are very expensive, but that's all counted in there. And in that fact, it's supposedly true that in 2018, in the 2019 report, 79.6% of Mississippians had access to something of that nature. 79.6. The disturbing fact is, in the report that was released just last month, that number went to 78.8. So we went down. The state of connectivity in Mississippi is bad and getting worse. The numbers show us that. And I don't think we have to sell anybody in the legislature on that fact. Rural Mississippians, as defined by the FCC, went from 62.6% access to 61% access, although I know that there will be talks about efforts that have been made to do different things that bring some limited, very limited sense of connectivity to our rural people. Proof's in the pudding. 2019, Alcorn County had 100% broadband coverage according to the FCC. 2020, that went to 76%. And the numbers, I can give you county after county in which that's a fact. Why do I bring that up? Because as Chairman Delano said a minute ago and Chairman Carter said, as we go about defining what is broadband, what are the needs, we have to start somewhere. And the rosiest picture, the best case scenario that we can present to you today as to painting the best scenario for our people is awful. And the numbers only go worse from there. Farm Bureau, working with Microsoft and other independent research agencies and foundations and such, looked at and came back to say that only 16% of Mississippians have access to internet service and broadband capabilities through computer technology. We know that the problems exist and we know that they're here and they're affecting our people. You heard Dr. Rankin at IHL talk about 51% of the students lack service. Dr. Smith from Jones Community College said something that I think needs to be remembered at this committee and remembered as we go about this debate together. 72% of the students of community colleges in Mississippi worried about going over their data plan to do online courses. affordability is an issue. In the poor state in the United States of America, affordability has to be an issue as we go forward. Now, you're going to hear, I think today, at least openings by some to a bold plan that can be both permanent, rapid, timely, and future-proof in its nature. Our education leaders know that this is a problem. They have said it today as in clear terms as I know how it can be said. And we know it's a problem. Our agency is the state agency that interfaces with the FCC. We have filed challenge after challenge to the maps that say, even in the best scenario, that our numbers and our connectivity is going down. We had 9,600 challenges filed by the Public Service Commission to the latest round of maps. 1,310 of your constituents, 1,310 Mississippians took time to do speed tests, give those results, and provide them to the FCC. That ain't a small army. That tells us where the issues are and tells us that they, in fact, exist. We were asked in the House this morning about speeds and about maps, and I think that's today maybe the best information that we can put out there. Because that is the one granular piece of data that we can work with you on. And we want to make sure that we make available to legislators, both individually and as a body, the information that we have before us that is related to mapping, because that really is the unserved areas. Again, in the best picture, those are where our unserved areas lie in Mississippi. Those students, as you've heard earlier today, really are experiencing drive-through education. Not distance education, drive-through education. Drive-through at my home school district of Nettleton, where you have to drive and traffic backs up, and our police department in a small town is directing traffic to get the parents down past the school to pick up the packets and turn in the homework. And we know that subpar broadband service is throwing good money after bad, is throwing jello on a wall and hoping that something sticks. And we will regret, mark my words, we will regret in this state not taking bold action at this time in a manner in which we deliver the very best service, the best reliable service, the best future-proof service at the most affordable rate to our people. And there are plans that are on the table to bring to the legislature to look at that. Plans that can be achieved in a short period of time. Plans that make sure people put skin in the game. And I think you're going to hear about some of those as we go forward. So to Chairman Delano and Chairman Carter, we want to make sure this information is readily available. Here are our commitments, mine and Commissioner Maxwell's and Commission, 24/7, 365. This is the issue of our day. So you call us. It takes me 2 hours, 30 minutes to get here if I drive the speed limit. But we will make sure that we make ourselves available, and I'd like to answer any of your questions.
I've got one. Why is coverage going down?
I think, Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of things. I think that you do have false reporting. I'm going to say it nicely. False reporting by incumbent carriers. That's a fact. It's undisputed. The FCC's recognized it. And once those are corrected, then of course it has that sort of effect on where those coverage areas are. You have, for instance, the idea of fixed wireless that has been paid for by federal funds. We have gotten more money out of the Universal Service Fund in this state over the past 10 years than almost any state in the United States of America, and yet we still have subpar service because we've gone by what the federal rules are. So you have, for instance, fixed wireless, which operates off of a cell phone signal that can on average reach 3 miles, and that's it, 3 miles. And so those type of services begin to degrade over time. That is a scientific fact. Degradation of service happens as broadband decreases. I think also we've been successful in some making our case that, you know, I can carry you to folks in rural areas that will tell you that map may say I've got service, but it ain't so. And under some federal regulations in the past, now think about this, if one home in a census block had 25/3 broadband service, could be from a satellite, could be costing that family $200 a month. I represent people, we all represent people that are paying those prices. But if that house is covered, the entire census block is covered. So we know that even if today, Mr. Chairman, that this committee and this legislature said, Public Service Commission, hand us the map. that map's going to have flaws. But it's where we start. It's the best place we can start to try to pull that data together.
Senator Delano has a couple questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner, the maps that you're referring to, do they show cellular service as well as fixed broadband?
No, sir. These are fixed broadband maps. Cellular mobile data is on a different scale. I may have those numbers. I don't have those with me. I can get them to you.
But what you're basically telling the committee today and telling us today is that that to achieve this distance learning by September 1, that we should not rely upon, or it would be a fallacy for us to think that we're going to be able to do that through the households or within the households of people across the state, correct?
Let me make sure I understand your question. You're saying that if a September 1 deadline is the deadline to achieve universal service, and I would be lying to this committee if I said that I thought that that could be done in that short a period of time. Now, as all politicians do, let me give you a follow-up answer on that. I think that you will hear presentations, particularly from our cooperatives, of how major monumental efforts, building out a future-proof system, bringing fiber to the home, to our most rural unserved areas, can be achieved in large proportion by the end of the year. But I want to say this, Chairman Delano, and you're much smarter on a lot of this stuff than I am, but I think that we all would agree that we could very easily here be penny wise and pound foolish. That we can simply do something for the sake of doing something and make a mistake in doing that because of 30 days, 60 days, when we could have a better plan. You know, the question for me that I believe in my heart is, do we limp from crisis to crisis, or do we say we're going to fix this thing? And that there are ways in which, in a time frame, to have your cake and eat it too.
Okay, so we just can't rely on fixed wireless to be able, for fixed broadband to provide the distance learning requirements that our schools are going to require of us, correct?
I think in large measure you could. I mean, I think in large measure there are options for projects in which
By September 1.
Many of which could be completed in September 1, which would breed not only a more quality service to people, but would deal also with those 72% of students who are worried about their data caps. So I think that you may have to have a hodgepodge approach in some ways to try to meet it in certain ways. But there are ways, and I think Mr. Callahan may speak to this, by which monumental efforts could be done by December 31st, and much of that by September the 1st. And I'll let him speak to their individual plans. Thank you.
Senator Whaley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, I have a question for you. A little bit of clarification on that. You spoke earlier to the FCC data maps, and you said that that was the avenue of approach that we had to start with. But you also said that they were flawed.
Yep.
So a little bit of clarification on that. You're saying that in order for us to get to where we need to go, we have to start with a flawed map. Is that right?
Let me say this. In a perfect world, Senator Whaley, we would not have to do that. We don't have to accept the FCC's definition. Let me be clear about that. We do not. I would encourage the legislature to look at a speed that is more than what the FCC's speed maps are. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you look at a baseline and you took the rosiest picture out there, you took the best case scenario anybody has, that's the FCC maps, that would have monumental flaws in them. If you move to any other study, aside from what the FCC says, we're in much worse shape by the numbers. But I'm not at all, let me be very clear about that, I'm not at all saying that the FCC maps are wonderful and are, the way Peter wrote it on the rock, as my grandmother used to say, and we're not saying that at all. It is the only data we have from a federal agency at this point that is provided. And if the legislature is looking for a baseline of where other funds are going based upon other criteria, then in fact that would be one baseline type approach to go. I don't think it's perfect, and in a perfect world, I would not rely on funding by the FCC map. But if the question is where do you start, that's what Congress and that's what the FCC have told us as an agency to police and look at the funding as it goes out through other federal programs. It's a mess. I mean, that's just the easiest way to say it. The maps are a mess, but if you have to start somewhere, those maps have the least number of unserved areas compared to other studies.
And I understand what you're saying there also, but if we're going to look at a common sense approach to this, if we're wanting to fix an issue, I don't think that we start by looking at a broken model. And I don't know
agree
where we
with
go, but if you're saying that the FCC maps are garbage, I just assume leave them in the garbage if we're going to
I
go
agree
about
with everything
fixing the
you just
issue.
said.
And the area that I represent is the model of rural area. FCC says we have coverage, we do not. FCC says it has coverage across my district, we do not.
Amen.
You talk about lining up to go to the school. When you look at schools across my district, they are lined up at public libraries, city halls, and at schools just trying to get schoolwork done. It has been nothing more than a mess. And, I'm just really interested and concerned about where we start with this. And if we're going to start with FCC, I've got real doubts whether a deadline of this September, next September, or 10 September is whether we'll get anywhere.
Senator Whaley, let me respond 1 second to that. I agree with you 100%. My reference to the FCC maps were saying what we're given, the data that we have available. That data is flawed. The jury has returned a verdict. It's flawed. But it is the data in which the Congress and the FCC have said are the methodologies. And that's where, and let me be very clear about that. That data is driven by information submitted by the carriers. By the carriers, not independently verified.
Senator Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Presley, I heard, I think it was Dr. Smith earlier, and I think you repeated the same thing by saying that students who are trying to do distance learning are saying that they had happened to be concerned about their data usage. They're running out of data, or the usage of the plan on their phones or whatever the device they may be using. But would you also agree that that's not fair to say, because you and I both know that no one uses all of their data on one specific thing. So there's hardly any way to use or to worry about your data plan using it directly for school related if you're not using it to surf the web for other things. So I think that's a big misconception when people talk about their data rates or they're using all of their data plan because they're focused on just their homework. I have 3 kids at home, and I know they tell me that all the time, Daddy, my data rate is up. But if you just use it for your schoolwork and not everything else, we don't have that problem. So when we talk about that in the tech industry, we need to understand that 100% of what they're saying is not 100% true, because there's other things that they're using the data for. So, and when we talk about the 25 and 3, I happen to be part of this industry for almost 30 years, and I do know that you can take 4 devices, cell phones, and a computer with 25/3 and do anything that you need to do and not miss any data. You don't miss anything by doing that. So when we talk about these things, I think we need to understand how these things really work and the speeds that we've got. Everybody wants 100 meg. Well, we know that that's a lot of data for anybody, and to ask carriers or anybody else to start giving us this kind of speed because people are not really telling the truth about the data and all of these things, I think all of these things starts to cause problems within the public sector, because we don't think that this is enough, but it really is enough. And I think that when we talk about extending the data and providing these broadband services, I think we're asking whomever it is, whether it's C-SPAR or the co-ops or whomever it is, when we start asking these individuals to give individuals more than 40 to 50 megs, I think we're really pushing this thing a whole lot, because that much is not really required. But you know as well as I do, we just always want more when more is not what's needed. What's really needed is to make sure that those people out there on the very end of the line are given some type of service. And also what we need to understand is that when we talk about these plans, I didn't hear
IHL or nor neither have I heard. Unfortunately, you are the first one here today to talk about how are we going to make sure that the unserved, not the underserved, but the unserved are the ones who, when we start to roll this out, are the first recipients of this broadband service.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your question. One thing I'd say, Senator Barnett, that I am sure that people use their data for things other than education. Many of them use it for telehealth. Many of them use it for telecommuting to work. Many of them use it for various and sundry things. And yes, some of them probably use it to stream Netflix. I don't think anyone would disagree that the fact that our world and the need for connectivity is ever going to get less. It's only going to get more, and that speeds and capacity matter. As to whether someone, again, uses that their designated data cap for other things, the fact is online education does put a stress upon whatever their limits within their package are, and it does cause them to go over. And secondly, it also carriers, as many know, throttle speeds. And so once you reach a certain usage, your speed gets throttled. And that is a fact. The FCC has allowed that to go on, but that happens. And so, if the legislature was presented with plans that would fix a capacity problem, a speed problem, and then you can choose that versus something that gets someone a minimum, I don't think that's a very hard decision, because the need for internet connectivity is never going to go less. And as transitions to online education continue to move, obviously it's going to be more and more. You heard Dr. Wright say earlier about telehealth and teletherapy. Those are requirements of live streaming. That eats up data quick. And so, I think that while I understand where you're coming from, I just respectfully have a different view to a sort of that.
I appreciate you coming before the committee today.
Thank you, Chairman
Commissioner
Delano,
Maxwell.
Chairman Carter.
We'll go ahead and move on to Mr. Callahan with the electric cooperatives. Thank you.
Gotta get that off, it's hot.
Yeah, it's very difficult to talk
It
with
is
it
hot.
on.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak. Let me just say here, kind of right off the bat, I just kind of found out about the parameters you laid out of September 1st, and I can tell you unequivocally we can't meet that deadline. But what you have in front of you that's being passed out is, I guess, probably a little over a week ago, we've had various organizations reach out to the co-ops. Of course, after January 2019 with the Mississippi Broadband Act, there's been a lot of people ask about co-ops and where we are, and I'll be honest, but for COVID-19, we probably would have had 2 or 3 systems that were already be in the retail business, but that kind of knocked us back some. But they were asking what we could do and what we could help, and I just, as you're looking at those, and I know y'all are going to start through, and let me throw out a couple caveats. Number one, some of these projects you're looking at would need approval by their local board of directors. I kind of cajoled and twisted arms to get them to get me something so we could have something to talk about here today in a very short time period. We only knew this meeting was happening on Monday night at 6 o'clock. Some of those plans we're going to work with partners on. And I would love to tell you who those partners are, but in some instances I don't know. And in some instances I can't tell because of non-disclosures. So if something like this was approved, those partnerships would have to form up very quickly. And then lastly, I want to say, we told y'all last year in the Mississippi Broadband Act, we needed patience and permission, that we weren't asking for money. We are still in that caveat. We're not asking you for money, but we've had various groups reach out to us and ask us, what could you do with COVID-19 monies?
Thank you, man. I appreciate you coming in with us today. So as of today, do any of your members provide internet service to households in the state?
Yes.
How many? You know,
Bear with me, I would think it would be 4
members.
working before they got it out. Tallahatchie Valley was probably the closest that I'm aware of actually going retail when the COVID-19 kind of shut us down. What they did, they kind of backtracked, and I believe they put up 3 wireless stations at different parking lots for folks to drive in and do the internet by.
Okay, and then the $150 million that you referred to, that is just for infrastructure costs and doesn't pay for any subscriptions to households?
No, that's
or
getting it to the
students?
households. That's
Okay,
getting
so
it to the households.
there would be a charge on top of that for the actual service itself for the homeowner, correct?
Yes. I mean, you would just like you pay anybody else. That's correct.
You just mentioned points of whether people can drive up for internet service. That's just some type of discussions that we've had in the interim for this distance learning initiative. So I'd be interested to, after we get done with the hearing, be interested to know if there's opportunities in other areas to kind of beef that up. That could be a short-term solution for what we're dealing with right now. Because I mean, we've got students that are driving 45 minutes to go get in the school parking lot to download. And we've had conversations that maybe a short-term solution is maybe a volunteer fire station or a courthouse somewhere where it's a shorter distance for the parent to drive.
Absolutely. And, you know, as we told you in 2019, our goal is long-term to get fiber out throughout all our Mississippians. But to kind of give you scale, if every co-op, if all 25 co-ops were to do broadband deployment through their entire system, you're talking close to $1.7 billion. So even $150 million, while it sounds like a lot of money, it's really a drop in the bucket compared to get it all over the state. This particular group, these are the folks that are in the hardest, most expensive areas to serve. They would probably be the ones you would go to last on a business model kind of plan. But they're the ones who we think need it the most. And we also, like I said, identified projects that we could get the money spent within the time frame you needed spending it.
Any other questions from committee members? Senator Doty?
What would be the average cost to the household, to the consumer? I know it might be different among the different co-ops, but what about speeds and prices?
Okay, and I'm just talking in general based on, because it's going to vary. The most expensive plan I've heard, Senator, was $79.99 for a gigabyte of speed. That's for a gig. Now, some will be offering lower plans, anywhere from 100 meg to 200 megs. I think the lowest speed I've heard by one co-op offering would be 100 megs at $49.99, I believe. Now, these are going to be reciprocal, so it's 100 megs down and 100 megs up. So it's the deal. That's our business model. We've seen that has worked for co-ops across the country. I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel. We've got 100 and something that beat us out there to this. So we've got a pretty good idea that that'll work very well.
So these are projects that could be completed if we have more co-ops, obviously, than this, so the other co-ops are not included in this proposal.
Yeah, we started talking about a week ago. We had about 36 hours to get this in. And again, some of these turned in information based on studies. They would go for their boards if the money was to become available. Not all these projects may be built. We just wanted to give you an idea of what we could do in the time frame. Like I said, these particular projects in total are $150 million. We would split it with you 75-75. If you only wanted to give us $25 million, I'm sure we've got co-ops that would take that money to go to these areas. Because like I said, these areas are very expensive. You'll notice on there the difference in price ranges going up. And a gentleman from Marshall County is in there. And it's very expensive because North Central, who is our densest co-op, comes down into Marshall County. And that is their most rural part of their co-op. They have very little resources there. They have no substation. They would have to build the huts and build the infrastructure. So that's a very high cost place to build in. That's why you'll see, we have in our co-op world, you've seen one co-op, because they differ so much. The Mississippi Delta, and I can tell you, David O'Brien, who's CEO of Delta Electric, has just tried every way in the world to make this work, because the Mississippi Delta really needs something to spur it and get it growing. And it's just very difficult. It's a large space with very little homes, 4 to 5 customers per mile, and it's hard to make that work. We could build it, Just not sure they could afford to pay us per month why we got to have to do it. And that's why we thought this might be a great opportunity to reach out and get those. I'm sorry it's not meeting with y'all's time frame. I apologize for that. But if you were to have some monies left over from this money, I think it'd be a very worthwhile project to go out there and reach. And like I said, I think our guys would be willing to take anything if you wanted to offer it. If not, that's fine too. We told you a year ago we wanted patience and permission, and we'll keep going on under that. But we were asked by different groups if we could help, and this is our best foot forward.
Senator Polk, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at this, quickly I couldn't discern what was going on. In each one of these cooperatives, the number of houses are listed that you would pass and available to be hooked up. What percent average in each cooperative is that of the homes that do not have high-speed internet?
Oh, Senator, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you. You know, I think our guys from engineering, and I will give credit to my staff who has worked tirelessly over the last 36 hours. We were given a lot of engineering maps that we tried to put landmarks, county lines, and places so y'all would recognize where these were, and we have worked very hard. I don't know. I would think, I tried to talk with as many of these guys as I could as we adjusted the numbers. I mean, some of these guys could have thrown 25, 30 million at you pretty quick, and y'all think, gosh, how could you spend that kind of money? I think Mayo and anybody who's dealt in fiber will tell you, you can spend a pretty good amount of money in fiber pretty quickly. It doesn't take long to get out there and really spend it. I think what most of our guys did, again, under the principles that we laid out in our first conference call when we started talking about this a week ago, we wanted to go to these unserved areas. And they probably, from the ones I talked to, picked a circuit, because we're following our power lines, that had their densest, most unserved areas to try to get the most people, the most product at the quickest amount of time. But what percentage that is of their overall, I don't know. If you got anybody you'd like me to inquire about, I can catch me afterwards and I'll find out for you.
Well, I was just thinking, I personally, if we wanted to consider this, I would want to have the answer to that question, because what we're again doing is picking winners and losers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But again, these are folks, and I would apologize. I would like to say that I would have a project in everybody's district, but we take the two chairman guys. I think y'all got pretty good amount of broadband where y'all serve. I mean, that's what we're doing. At some point, I know you represent districts, but we also represent the state. And I think this project looks good for the state, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you for coming today. I would like to make one suggestion. I know Hunter, fitness is very important to him. I think that you ought to have him out doing some fiber laying right now.
Well, he's so tall, he could probably reach it without a bucket truck. You know, he could just reach up there and grab it.
That's a fact.
But again, I just want to reiterate from our guys, you know, this is our goal to help. We want to be part of the solution. We'd like to partner with you. If you'd like us, we're more than willing. If not, and I know y'all got a lot of people asking for the money, that's fine. We'll do the best we can. We're sure there'll be other sources, but we were asked to provide solutions, and this was our best that we could do, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. We appreciate it. All right, Mr. Flint, you're next up. Mr. Flint's with AT&T.
Good afternoon. Thank you for...
Yeah, you probably pull that mic
I'm going to have to
down.
lower that a little bit. I'm not quite as tall as Michael is. I'm Mayo Flint with AT&T, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before the committee today and talk about this very important issue. We had a good meeting in the House earlier this morning, and I was able to share some thoughts there as well. And I'd really like to break it up into two things. There is the immediate need of how do we provide basically remote education learning to school children in time for the upcoming school year. And, you know, when I think about that, I think about the fact that there are a lot of remote workers. In March, we sent 90 to 100,000 employees around the country home and told them to work from home. And I say that because there are tools, there are solutions, services that are available for remote work, and they are also available for remote learning. And I wasn't in the earlier session at 1, so there may have been some conversation about that. But we have a product called Access My LAN, and it has security, and it allows the students to work remotely. Now, when we send all of our employees home, some are working off of a fixed service and some are working off of a wireless service. A lot of these solutions work with laptops or iPhones. They work with mobile devices. Now, that presents some challenges, okay? So if you've got somebody that has connectivity, they've got connectivity and they're in good shape, and one of these solutions would help them learn remotely. If they may have connectivity, but they may not be able to afford it. Affordability is an issue, and so I think that's something that the legislature can look at. And then, of course, the third problem is, or issue is no connectivity. Even if they could afford it, they don't have access to broadband to allow them to connect to the network. And so, you know, the legislature, state governments are looking at what are devices that can be provided to provide that connectivity. I know that in several school districts, and you've probably heard about this, that there are wireless routers that have been put on buses and at other locations. It's not perfect. It's not ideal. Certainly, it's not ideal. But it is a solution that is available in a short amount of time. So I just offer those thoughts as some thoughts and some suggestions for you to consider. When you talk about the connectivity issue and the broadband gap, the rural broadband gap, it is an issue. It's an issue around the country. It's not unique to Mississippi. It's more challenging here, like in a lot of rural states, because the more rural your state is, the more challenging it is to bridge the gap. I shared this morning with the House a program that my company has been participating in for the last 6 years, and I think that program, the components of that program, can be informative to the committee as you think about how you may want to fund broadband deployment in the state of Mississippi. The FCC created the Connect America Fund 2 program, and what they did with that program is they said, we're going to identify unserved or underserved locations in each state, and we're going to provide a set amount of funding to deliver service to those particular locations. This was a volunteer program. My company, other companies signed up, my company signed up. In the state of Mississippi, we committed to deploy broadband service to almost 134,000 locations that have been designated as unserved or underserved across the state of Mississippi. The funding for that was $50 million a year for 6 years. We're in our 6th year. So that's $300 million. If you do the math, $300 million divided by 34,000 locations works out to about $2,300 per location. So the commission set the rules, and the rules were the service, if you accept the money, you have to deliver the service to these locations, and they are unserved and underserved. These are remote locations. You have to provide at least 10 megabits downstream and 1 up. You have to provide it at a price that's comparable to what a customer could get in a non-rural area. But we're not going to tell you what technology you have to use. We're going to tell you, here are the requirements, here's the funding. If you accept it, you decide how you're going to do it, but we're going to follow up and we're going to make sure that all of these locations are there and that it's available. We are in the 6th year of this program, and we have deployed service to 107,000 locations around Mississippi. These are unserved or underserved locations. When we've had some launch events at some towers, Some of you on the committee have joined us, and Commissioner Presley joined us for a few. These are very remote locations. They are in 65 counties around the state. It varies by county. So in one county, there may be one tower, and in another county, there may be a handful of towers. And the way we're doing this is using a fixed wireless internet service. And so we install new equipment on a tower. It's like cellular, except it's not mobile, it's fixed. And there's new equipment that's installed on the tower. And then when a customer calls and orders a service, we send a technician out. We attach an antenna to the side of the house, and there's a router inside, so the customer has Wi-Fi on the inside of the house. I said that we deployed it to 107,000. We have 27,000 more to go, which we will complete by the end of the year. So this is our program that's ongoing right now. And I want to be clear, I wish we had 107,000 customers, but we don't. We have 107,000 locations that did not have broadband when this program began about almost 6 years ago. We hear very good feedback from our customers. The customers that have it like the service. While the minimum requirement is 10 megabits down, we find the typical customer receives about 25. Some may receive less, some may receive a little bit more. A lot of that depends on geography and how many people are on that particular tower. I was asked this morning, what's the coverage area? It's about 3 miles around that tower. It can be 5 miles. It depends on the topography, but 3 miles is a good average. This has been a good program. I think, like I say, the customers that have it have really enjoyed it. We have seen a little bit of an uptick in sales since the pandemic hit in some of these areas. And the FCC will be instituting another program, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. That auction will start in October of this year, and that's, I think, $16 billion in the first round and then $4 billion in the round after that. So I just wanted to share that as an example of a program that is working and that has been deployed and has provided service to unserved and underserved areas in our state. And I'll tell you, Mississippi, we either have the second or the third most locations in this program in the country. And I can't remember if, I think California's first and Texas may be second, or we may be second. I kind of get confused. But we get a lot. And the preliminary number of locations for this upcoming program, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, the preliminary number is for 231,000 locations. So I'm just sharing that. You know, the state of Mississippi, you may, as our leaders, may decide that you want to put some money into broadband deployment, and I think that that's something worth considering. I would tell you that the model that the FCC used, I think, is a good template. They said, make sure, it's going to the unserved. Michael said that's who they're going to focus on, the unserved. Make sure it goes to them. Have set requirements about what is the standard that is expected for the delivery of the service, a time frame for the delivery of the service, and a commitment that each of those will be met. So we found the program that we've been participating in very good and very effective.
Senator Delano for a question.
So let me just make sure that I understand. For connectivity with respect to distance learning initiatives, you will be able to provide a service you will be able to provide a connection using cellular or LTE. You have a homebound connections that you'll be able to provide that could be a fixed wireless solution, it could be a wired solution, it could be a fiber solution. Those are all services that you are currently providing. And then you also, another way that it could be done is through some type of a public hotspot.
Right.
which could be done through, like we had talked about before, with volunteer, or at a volunteer fire department, or some other state building or state agency where we just turn the antennas around and allow for people to have access to the outside. Is there any other technology that I'm missing right now?
I think you covered the waterfront. These remote working solutions, they're going to work if it's wired or wireless, and all of those would work. The more hotspots you have, the more available it would be for those that don't have connectivity at home.
And you brought up your MyLAN product, and that's more of a service that's provided that's above and beyond just but just above and beyond the connection part.
Right.
So you provide that, and members of the committee, we've had some discussions with MDE where they were very concerned about the security of the network connection, and also to make sure that the connections were SIPA compliant. And what we've told and what we've instructed the Department of Education to do is to work with their learning management systems, and within their learning management systems to account for all of those or all those requirements, and then provide us, the legislature, a little bit more about the minimum requirements for services, for connection services, so that we can provide that information to the other internet service providers around the state. So just be aware that MyLAN is a local area network that would allow for discrete and secure traffic between those end devices that they're provided at school and the school district itself.
Right. Security is obviously important, and making sure that the service is used for what it's intended, right, which is education and learning, and not getting off and watching entertainment and things like that. But I was frankly surprised when I heard this morning that MDE they testified they have 2 million attempted attacks a day. So security is an issue, and solutions like that provide a secure connection for the student and for whatever education, MDE or IHL or whomever the customer may be.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. I appreciate it.
Senator Weatherford, question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During your explanation, you stated that there were 107,000 unserved locations that y'all had created, and you had 27,000 more to go.
Yes.
But then I heard you say that they weren't customers, that they were locations. Can you explain that?
Yes. Well, our obligation to the FCC is to make the service available at 133,000 locations. But we don't have to have any customers.
Well, can you explain to me why that's a good business model? Because if the point of this is to bring accessibility, I would want to bring it to a customer, not to a location. And if we're going to serve the unserved, why are you serving someone who's not there?
No. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not being clear. There is a customer there. It is a customer location, but there's no obligation on the customer to buy the service. There's no obligation on the customer to buy the service. So we are committed. We have to deploy the service to make it available to 133 locations that don't have availability. We provide service to a lot of locations that are in served areas, and people don't select our service.
Well, that's very different than what you said at the beginning, and I understand that, but it just seemed very comical to me that you would offer a service somewhere that there was not a customer. Now, that what you're meaning is completely different, and I'm sorry, but that just...
Okay, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. We're committed to deliver the service to 133,000 locations where there are potential customers.
And one more question. What is, if we're looking to serve unserved, if there are capabilities in places in certain areas, why do you not go forth and bring that accessibility? Where I live, on the edge of my property, there is an AT&T junction box on one side of the property and an AT&T junction box on the other side of the property. You can get internet service to this junction box, and you can get it to this junction box, but I can't get it in between. And that's caused a lot of people between these two junction boxes the inability to work from home during this and during other instances. Why are you not making forth an effort to bring accessibility to that area? And that's not just the only one that I know of. That's the main one that I know. That's one that I can tell you for sure. In a span of a half a mile, you're missing 12 homes. That's 12 customers. They've all written you letters saying that they would buy the service. Can you explain to me why?
Yes, I can. And it comes down to resources. There are just only so many resources for us to invest capital, and we can't meet every single need that we would like to meet. Although we will invest on average about $250 million a year into our networks in Mississippi, there are still places like situations that you're referring to where we need to be able to invest additional capital. But when you put it all together, the wireless network and the wireline network, there are places where there need to be upgrades.
So you won't invest capital resources into certain areas, but you'll invest them into unserved areas where there's potentially not a customer. Is that right?
Well, we're participating in the FCC's program, which was designed to deliver service to these unserved customers.
Does this also use the FCC maps that are incorrect?
Well, that's a whole other issue. We use the maps that the FCC gave us.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll admit I'm a little more confused than I was when I came in, and that's saying something. 107,000 locations in the state of Mississippi or in the country?
In the state of Mississippi.
And each of those locations has a 3 to 5 mile potential radius to reach a customer?
Yes, sir.
43,000 square miles in the state of Mississippi? Possibly. I Googled that.
Okay.
How are we not serving? Where are these 107? Are they on top of one another?
They're in remote locations, sir, but they're out there.
300 million, I'm sorry, over 6 years, correct?
Yes, sir.
$2,800 per location.
Thereabouts, yes, sir.
And possibly no customer served for $2,800.
No, the customers have the ability to order the service. It's just what I'm telling you is that they may not order the service. It's available if they want to order the service.
And I understand we can't force people to serve. I live in Belmont, Mississippi. My residents, I cannot get service. I'm 3 miles out of the center of the metropolis of downtown Belmont. But there are ports because my mother had service at that location. And now there's not enough service. Now we're getting technical and it's way over my head, but there's service in that area, but there's not any ports remaining. Is that one of these hot spots, or is that is that one of these locations, or am I completely misunderstanding?
No, sir, that would be something separate. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
I guess I would like to see a map with 107,000 dots.
Okay.
If it's possible. Plus 27,000 more to come. I mean, I really am confused. I mean this sincerely. If it's a 3 to 5 mile radius of service and there's 107,000 of them, even the federal government's not that inefficient, I would hope. But I can't understand that. I can't fathom it.
Okay. Maybe there are 107,000 customer locations. Now, a tower will serve numerous locations around. So there's not 107,000 towers.
Okay. I'm sorry, you said 107,000 locations. I just want to make sure, because I really was confused.
Yes,
okay.
I understand. Perhaps I wasn't clear enough. I'm sorry. It's 107,000 customer locations, either a residence or a business where this service is available. There's not 107,000 towers, it's 107,000 customer locations.
Okay, and are you basing that on, I mean, is that how it's reported to the census blocks, is based on availability to
Yes,
people?
we're required, the plan says that we would deploy service to the unserved in census blocks that the FCC has designated.
Okay, and is this the 300 million, and I know you referenced the 16 billion and 4 billion that's coming up, but the 300 million, is that from the universal user fee or subscriber fee or some of this rural thing we pay each month on our bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I just want to make sure to clear it up for me, and I think everybody else might have been a little confused too, is 107,000 now potential customers, whether they take the service or not.
Right.
And we spent $2,800 per potential customer to try to serve the underserved?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Flint. Appreciate you coming today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
All right, Mr. Moncrief with C Spire.
I can wear the mask or the glasses. I can't wear both.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thanks for having us here today. And on behalf of C Spire's more than 1,500 Mississippi-based employees, we appreciate the opportunity to share our ideas with you. I do want to take just a minute to talk about some of the things our very creative and hardworking employees have been doing throughout this pandemic to take care of our customers, their neighbors, and the folks we live and thrive with. Throughout the entire pandemic, C Spire has been committed to working on solutions to help our customers maintain stability in both their work and personal lives, and we look forward to assisting you as we discuss ideas and solutions to help keep our state students connected. Part of our commitment has been in partnership with the University of Mississippi Medical Center and the Department of Health in serving as a virtual triage center through our C Spire Health app to assist in screening patients for COVID-19, which has been a real success story. Mississippi has done an excellent job getting folks tested for COVID-19 when compared to our neighbors. In addition, we have worked with the education community and local leaders around the state to provide free Wi-Fi access through a variety of sites, whether it be at our store parking lots, churches, or community centers. We also provided free data to our wireless customers to be used on educational sites for K through 12, community colleges, and universities. We realize that the pandemic has caused hardships for many Mississippians, and to that end, we have been able to provide temporary economic relief to our customers who may be struggling to pay their bills as a result of the pandemic. Throughout it all, our employees have really been heroes. They have continued to excel at their jobs, keeping our customers connected, and we have provided hazard pay for team members on the front lines, those whose jobs require them to be in contact with the public, such as our installers who are putting in internet in folks' homes or businesses, or manning curbside posts at our retail locations. We're really proud of what our employees have done. Now, as we look to the public policy debate on how to address broadband connectivity in this state, we see two categories of concerns, the near term and the long term. First, what can we do in the near term to prepare for the upcoming school year? Should students' access to traditional classroom environments continue to be restricted? And second, over the long term, how can we make the investments necessary to close the broadband connectivity gap that exists for some in our state, too many in our state? Neither of those concerns can be addressed by C Spire or any provider on its own. As we look at the state's short-term distance learning concerns, it really comes down to coverage or access and affordability. You've heard that already today. We have some school districts in the state where coverage is not a problem. However, families may not have the means to purchase service, and you have other extremely rural school districts where coverage is limited, combining with that with limited resources to pay for service, making it difficult to do remote schoolwork or remote work at all. Our education team has been meeting with numerous school districts across the state and have identified 3 potential means for quick deployment of connectivity to students and teachers. There are home Wi-Fis, mobile hotspots or school bus hotspots, Mr. Flint mentioned, and then also what we call anchor institution-enabled Wi-Fi. I'll go through the three of those really quickly. First, the MiFi option. School districts could provide mobile hotspots to students who they have identified as not having connectivity at home. Same for teachers. The district would purchase the service from a provider on likely a monthly basis, and the devices could be locked or secured where only the student and their provided educational device, a Chromebook, an iPad, whatever that device is, would be the only thing able to access that MiFi. These devices would, of course, need an appropriate cellular signal, 4G coverage or robust 3G coverage in order to have connectivity. Second, the mobile hotspots or school bus hotspots. School buses can be equipped with technology to provide a Wi-Fi type connection for students within a 75 or 100-yard circumference around the school bus. And as a matter of fact, we do this today for highway patrol cars. Every trooper car is a hotspot. This is not all that different. The idea being that buses could be deployed to different parts of the school district for certain time periods or parked in areas of the district that are easily accessible for users. It would also have the added benefit of being able to provide students a connection during normal bus operations for some students who may have long commutes and get their homework done on the bus. Third option we've looked at is anchor institution-enabled Wi-Fi. Anchor institutions in cities and counties can be equipped with high-capacity Wi-Fi to provide free drive-in or parking lot Wi-Fi for students. Can be explored. This could be established where state agencies, many of whom will soon be connected to a fiber connection as we transition the state contract. And that fiber could be connected to a Wi-Fi system that broadcasts outside the building, giving students who don't have access at home the opportunity to connect to a high-speed network to complete schoolwork. Think of the old AOL, right? It's not an ideal solution, but back then you used to do your email, then you'd dial in and load it up, and you'd get your new email, and then you'd go offline and do that. This would allow a student who doesn't have access to home to perform their schoolwork in a, not ideal, but a setting where they could reach high-capacity broadband. As I mentioned earlier, we have already seen students accessing C Spire's pop-up Wi-Fi networks at community centers and churches and our stores around the state. As a matter of fact, you can Google, there are about 300 pop-up Wi-Fi spots in Mississippi. Google provides a map. And you can check out where those are now. Not that hard to replicate and formalize with MDE. It should be noted that all of these ideas do require the purchase of new hardware and MiFi devices. Both are in high demand right now, as every school district in the country is trying to solve the very problem we're talking about. So the sooner that providers and the sooner that school districts can have certainty about the path forward, the better for Mississippi. We'll be able to secure supply chains and inventories to meet the demand. Now, I'd like to take a second to talk about the long term. We've talked about that here today too. Over the long term, as we look to permanently closing the connectivity gap in the state, we should know that Mississippi has a very robust fiber network for a rural state. According to Broadband Now, which keeps up with these stats in part using FCC data, 40% of Mississippi households on a population basis have access to fiber-backed services. Maybe that's through their cable provider, through a provider like C Spire or AT&T, Cable One, you name it. 40% of Mississippians. That still leaves a huge gap, but that's what's available today. This interstate system of fiber that exists from various providers allows us to connect homes and businesses and colleges and the places we talked about before where what pop-up Wi-Fi could be enabled. However, C Spire Fiber, nor anybody else's, reaches everyone in the state. In fact, it's unlikely that any single provider would be able to economically provide a high-capacity broadband connection to each household in the state of Mississippi. Some states have broadband grant programs that incent existing providers to build out to underserved or lower-density communities in which the business case for high-capacity broadband is unworkable. And to the extent you consider such a program, we encourage you to take a dig once or a future-proof approach by implementing technology requirements that ensure any grant-funded broadband assets are able to deliver the speeds and capacities not needed just now, but those needed decades into the future. The pandemic has taught us many things, some more than others. But we all know that sufficient broadband speed and capacity is more important than ever before. No longer is it just about merely providing connectivity. It's about providing connectivity at adequate speeds and capacity that allow mom and dad to participate in a WebEx for work while at the same time allowing their kids to Zoom with their teachers. As data consumption increases, this can only be done with symmetric, same speed up and down, 1 gig up, 1 gig down, high-speed capabilities of fiber. As a Mississippi-based company with our roots in Franklin County, one of the state's most rural places, we know the importance of serving those who are in need. We've been doing it now for over 70 years. As the internet provider to Mississippi's universities, community colleges, many local governments and school districts across this state, we are absolutely committed to working with you and others to provide the broadband connectivity solutions Mississippians need now and those they need for decades to come. Again, thanks for letting me be here and happy to take the questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Moncrief?
Oh, I have one.
Senator Barnett.
Mr. Moncrief, this question is to you and to Mayo Flint with AT&T. And that is, when Mr. Mayo was up earlier, he said that there's a number of spots that could be served if individuals wanted the service. And would you also agree that if C Spire or whomever is providing this service, with as rural as Mississippi is, and with most of the school districts that are in Mississippi have free and reduced lunches. So that lets us know that there are some individuals who may not can afford the services that are offered. So would it be also safe to say if we went out there and did provide the service to the underserved, that there's not a guarantee that these individuals would buy the service if it's not a free service for most of them?
Sure. I think affordability, like I said, affordability is one of the key components. Absolutely, I'd agree with that.
So would you also agree that there should be some concern in that regards as well when we think about that? Because if we look at our school districts and we realize how many of our school districts and our school children are on free and reduced lunches, that should tell us where those parents' income levels are. And some of them are going to have to make a choice whether I'm going to buy this internet service from whomever it is, or am I not going to purchase it? So just making it available is not going to make sure that individuals are going to use this service for their children who may need it at their homes if there's a cost associated. With both of y'all?
I won't make Mayo attack the CAF program again. Here's what I'll say. That is absolutely true. Affordability is a key component of this. I don't think that's necessarily a problem the state has to solve because there are federal programs like E-rate. As you mentioned, most schools' children in Mississippi are on free and reduced lunch. As a result, on average, 85% of a school district's internet bill is paid for by the federal government. So if that internet bill on a month is $1,000, the school district doesn't have to pay $850 of that. It's paid by the FCC through the E-rate program. One component of what I'm talking about, whether it's MiFi, any of this off-campus access, MiFis, school buses, all of that, the State Department of Education has a waiver pending before the FCC asking for the FCC to allow them to use that fund, that 85% support, and use that money for off-campus access. Today, it can only be used for on-campus access. That's one way of attacking your problem. If I can take 85 cents out of every dollar that family has to spend to access the internet, I've done a lot, right? And so I can start to address that affordability problem. It is absolutely an issue. I think there are a lot of programs on the federal side that are addressing that problem. They don't get off campus right now for K through 12.
But if what you and Mayo said in regards to the mobile hotspots, the school buses or the highway patrol vehicles or whatever it may be, those are all temporarily, correct?
Yeah, they're short-term solutions.
They're short-term solutions.
Absolutely.
And so, but what I'm talking about is after this is over.
Yep.
And there has to be something permanent in place. Have we given thought to how, even after we make this available, how are the individuals who we make it available to will take advantage of it? And like Mr. Mayo said, and I hate to know that even if it's you all or anyone else who provide the service out there that can be accessed by the underserved, but because of their income levels and other things, they do not take advantage of it. So we need to,
wouldn't you agree that there needs to be some thought again into making sure that once we have this in place for those who are unserved, to make sure that there's a way that these children in these homes will be able to access this once the temporary devices have been removed from the area?
Yeah, we're in violent agreement. Absolutely. Affordability is a key issue.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
Any other questions from the committee?
I know we're talking about only a short-term solution, but I'm just wondering, what is the cost of doing like a mobile hotspot in a school bus? Like, what is the school district looking at to equip a school bus?
You're talking about round numbers, something like $1,000 to equip the school bus with the equipment, the Wi-Fi hotspot, the connectivity. Then you're talking about the service, which could, under current state rates that are offered by both my company and AT&T, about $40 a month in order to facilitate that. Those are published rates that are available on ITS's website.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Moncrief. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I think one thing that we've learned through the discussion today is that there's not a universal way to fix rural broadband. It's going to take the private sector working hand in hand to solve this issue, and I would encourage the private sector to engage in conversation amongst each other to where we can find a long-term solution. And with that, I'll yield to Senator Leno.
I appreciate it. I want to thank everyone else for coming out. There is something that I think is very important for all of us to remember when we talk about these mobile hotspots or these school buses or whatever. It's going to be very important for us to make sure that, as I referred to earlier, those learning management systems are designed to take temporary connectivity into account, meaning that it's not going to be practical for every student to have connectivity 100% of the time or uninterrupted amount of time. We need to make sure that our school districts are setting up their curriculum and their delivery programs so that they can be downloaded at one time, and then that they can leave those hotspots, go back to their house or to their homestead and perform their work, and then come back to those hotspots and upload all of their information. So we need to make certain that our school districts understand not everyone is going to have an uninterrupted data connectivity, and that they need to design their programs to be able to do this batch type of work. So just keep that in mind. It's another consideration that we're having to work through as we make these decisions. But thank you very much.
Senator Tate for a motion.
Rise and report.
Rise and report.